us for another interesting program on Millennium Television, and we are here tonight with your favorite program, Millennium Tonight. And today we are featuring yet another interesting guest in the name of Celestine Mukandila, who happens to be a prominent Lusaka lawyer and also a member of the Patriotic Front. And as you may well be aware, the Patriotic Front is also a member of the Tonse Alliance. He is here to discuss with me pertinent issues as we sum it all up in national matters. I'm your host, Collins Mwansa Mulipa. Celestine Mukandila, good evening.
Good evening, comrade. I hope you are fine.
I am fine. I trust you are too.
Well, could be better.
Could be better. Well, it's nice that you could be better. We trust that you should be very, very fine. After I think you have, the nation is aware that you have been practically everywhere running around. Most recently, I think much of you was held from the by-elections that were being held in Kambaa. I think we have talking points from that and more. So viewers, join us as we further delve into discussions with Celestine Mukandila, who happens to be a prominent Lusaka lawyer. Celestine, for starters, probably not to sway away from what has just been the preamble of our discussion, we did touch the issue of the by-elections that were held in Kambaa recently, to which the UPND made victorious. A lot of activities. It was a very eventful by-elections through the campaigns, and even certain events recorded during the polls and after the polls. What do you make of what transpired in Kambaa, especially around the campaigns, the attitudes, and the overall conduct of the political players, the police, the political parties, the Electoral Commission of Zambia?
Well, I think it's quite interesting that we had underwent that process. The process itself was very interesting in that, starting with nominations, where our candidate was almost blocked from contesting those elections, and also just filing in their nomination, until we had a well-reasoned discussion with the Electoral Commission of Zambia, which eventually decided to allow our candidate, and the returning officer decided to allow the nomination to go through. As you may be aware, you know, an election is a very contentious process. An election is a very contentious process. By virtue of it being contentious, it was within the wisdom of the Electoral Commission of Zambia that whenever there is an election, there ought to be a committee that is set up, which is the Dispute Resolution Committee, which committee handles any dispute that may arise with regards to elections and election process, as the case may be. Of course, we underwent that discussion where we had to remind our colleagues from the Electoral Commission of Zambia to try and follow constitutional provisions. And of course, from there we went further. Now, during the process of the election campaigns itself, where we had a lot of issues happening, where we would complain to the Electoral Commission of Zambia, for example, with regards to the abrogations of our colleagues, and the abrogations of the electoral process code by our colleagues in the UPND, wherein they would decide to go and campaign in areas that were allocated for other political parties without following the campaign schedule. A lot of complaints were made. Unfortunately, the Electoral Commission of Zambia could not really make a decision to bar or to suspend or expel the UPND from the entire process, because, I mean, they abrogated electoral process procedures and codes on a number of occasions, to the tune of, you know, there was vote buying and all that, and all these were recorded, to the extent that Transparency International, TIZ, released its statement and indicated that all those issues were made in that election. And it was quite interesting that the police could not really act on complaints that were made on the many violence acts that occurred at in Kambaa, and the suspects or whoever it is that were perpetrators of those violent activities were known. Reports were made to the police. Up to now, we've not heard of any arrests, nor have we heard of anyone being summoned for questioning.
Supposedly, I think sections of society allege that you were the aggressors in most cases in the Kambaa by-elections, and I think it is true to the effect that you, among others, were also even summoned to the police. If there were any records of misconduct from the UPND, as you allege, could there be any substantial evidence that you were availed?
It's actually on record. In terms of being aggressors, I don't think that would be a correct way of defining how, because we were victims. We were victims of circumstances. We were victims of the aggression that was there, to the tune that on the very day of election, on the very day of polling, we had gone round in different polling stations. We reached one of the polling stations where we were seriously attacked, to the extent that I was with President Peter Chanda, I was with Honorable Jinchisenga, Mambilima MP, I was with other colleagues from the media and other colleagues from New Congress Party. Now, it was very unfortunate that we would see President Peter Chanda being attacked. He was almost stabbed by these colleagues from the UPND, and luckily he missed it and he was brutally cut. His phone was snatched. When you look at other journalists that were there, their phones were snatched, they were seriously beaten. I could hear these UPND cadres even indicating that Letani matches Bashokeshab. You know, Honorable Tsenga was whisked into the polling station by the two police officers, and to the extent that polling was, polls were suspended because of the violence that was there. Luckily, we managed to escape that and went straight to the police. Unfortunately, at the police also, we found a situation where our colleagues from the police decided to advise that, you know, there was a report of a suspected theft that occurred when we undertook a participation of a search that was being conducted at the named lodge by the owners of the lodge. So it so happened that, well, we gave our own and caution statements, and statements were recorded. Unfortunately, that very day, by the time we were done at 19:30 to 20 hours, that very day, the police decided that they were not going to arrest us on that day, but they opted to detain us. Of course, the truth of the matter is it was very systematic. That detention was very systematic because we were the ones that were receiving the PVT results from polling stations, and it so happened that we couldn't have made it to go to the totaling center. And you know what transpired there was, there were 5 people that were accredited by the Electoral Commission of Zambia to be found into the polling station, the totaling, not the polling station, I mean the totaling center. And these 5 people included myself, Honorable Jinchisenga, President Peter Chanda, President Sean Tembo, and Honorable Luvinda. Unfortunately, they decided to hold on to myself and Honorable Chisenga. It means it is -3. President Peter Chanda was seriously injured. It was a hospital case, so he was equally substituted. President Sean Tembo was equally injured, so it was equally another hospital case.
Are you insinuating that all these incidents were systematically orchestrated to...
It appeared to me, it appeared that it was very systematic, because even the people that orchestrated the violence were imported people. Unfortunately, we had, at some point, we had suspected that the UPND were keeping the offensive weapons into a room that they called an emergency room, which we had actionable intelligence of that operation or of that same issue, and to the extent that we knew. So the owner of the lodge decided to go and search the place. Of course, we were present as the owner of the lodge decided to do that. Unfortunately, we couldn't even, the owner of the lodge couldn't even search the room where those items were kept because the owner of the room had refused to even allow.
As a seasoned lawyer, Celestine, do you think the actions you took in searching the said room or having planned to search the said room with the people that you were with was in order?
Well, I will tell you, and it's extremely important that these very basic legal principles are understood. When you go into a lodge or when you go into a hotel, the kind of authority you have to be in that room is what we call a license. Now, therein is a difference between a license and a lease. When you have a license to be in a place, such as a lodge, what you have then is not exclusive authority to be in that place. That is why the owners of the lodge would come in and provide room service, where they'll come and clean the room and all that. Whether you are around or you are there or you are not there. So that in itself is what we call a license, that you have, the authority you have to occupy a room in a lodge. So you don't have exclusive, you don't have absolute and exclusive authority to that room. Now, what that means is that the owners of the premises can go into the room at any time. So there's a principle of ingress, so they can go into the room at any time. That is what the law says. So what transpired then was, I knew to say, if I was to, I cannot even have any authority to go and search any place or any premises. So what transpired is we had gone to the chief to request for assistance, so that the chief should inform the police and ensure that this is done. But what transpired is the chief called one officer and called the owner of the lodge. In fact, the owner of the lodge was actually the chief's young brother, luckily. And the chief's young brother was told by his older brother to say, my brother, we don't want to be in problems. You need to check what is there in your lodge. And the owner of the lodge moved. So he moved together with the retainer for the chief, went to his lodge, requested for keys for the first room that he opened that room, searched the two of them with the retainer, and they found there was nothing. Went to the next room, requested for the keys were not there. They were told that the owners of the room had gone with the keys. So the owner of the lodge told the receptionist to call the owner of the room, because he wanted to ensure that there are no offensive weapons that are kept in there. So what transpired then is, 4 minutes down the line, the owner of the room came, the same guy that they were calling a commander. He came and he went straight and opened his room, sat on his bed, and outside there the owner of the lodge was there and the retainer for the chief. The owner of the lodge introduced himself as the owner of the lodge and said, this is what is happening. I've come to ensure that you are not harboring any equipment that may be offensive in this room. That guy who was seated on that bed just literally refused, just said, no, and then he says, no, I'm actually the owner of the lodge. The guy just said, no, I have refused. And that is how come, when he was saying I have refused, I noticed the guy was on his phone. Because I was peeping from behind, I just said, colleagues, let's go. Because this guy is trying to organize cadres who are going to come and cause confusion here. No violence, nothing. But the only thing is, we left, and only to hear that there is a report at the police that we roughed up the guy, we went away with a bag where there was a laptop and...
So, Counsel, you are telling the nation that in actual sense, there was no confrontation whatsoever.
Nothing.
There was no altercation between
Nothing
the
whatsoever.
state commander who was the occupant of the room and the search party that
Nothing.
included you, the other Tonsi Alliance members, and the owner of the lodge.
Nothing whatsoever. The only person who I actually spoke with, that guy, the same guy, the only time I had an opportunity to even confront him was when we went back to the chief and found him there. He had started lying to the chief that we roughed him up, we opened the door, we first opened the door, and we even got away with a bag. And we told him to say, you are lying. You are in the chief's palace and you are lying like this.
But
that is the only time I had confronted the guy. In fact, at his room, the only people he talked to were the retainer and the owner of the lodge. And those people are there, they will testify, I can assure you.
Therein was born a serious offense against Mumbipiri.
No, that was a different scenario, by the way.
Okay.
So these are different scenarios. I've been receiving a lot of phone calls from individuals telling me to say, Council, are you in Kawambo? Have you been charged with aggravated? No. These were different scenarios. The Mumbipiri scenario is where they confronted the minister who was purportedly buying voters' cards and the NRCs. So they confronted the minister. And I've seen the videos, I've watched the videos where I have seen that there was no physical violence. Of course, there was confrontation or altercations. Now, that is why in our preamble I indicated that it's extremely important to understand an electoral process. An election is a process. It's a serious process. During this process, therein comes a committee that is made by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, which is the Dispute Resolution Committee. Now, such altercations, such incidents that occur during the process of an election are supposed to be handled ideally by the Electoral Commission of Zambia through that same committee, which is the Dispute Resolution Committee. For me, I don't think it is something which even ought to have been reported to the police. But the truth of the matter is, I believe, and I don't think anyone was hurt there. I don't think anyone was attacked. I know people confronted each other. I don't think that there was any kind of theft as the case is. Because I've just noticed, actually, someone was telling me to say, are you telling me that in all these incidents, the only things that were missing are 20,000 kwachas? So it means UPND cadres, all of them were given 20,000 kwachas. So it's a bit funny that it was so systematic that in all these events, 20,000 kwachas are being mentioned. But whatever the case, my take is these are disputes that ought to have been resolved by the Dispute Resolution Committee of the Electoral Commission of Zambia.
Is it in order?
I do not think.
Is it in order really that Honorable Mumbipiri has to be arrested and charged with the offense of aggravated robbery? For me, I will tell you that this police has been abused. The police in its current state is an abused state. The executive arm of government has abused the police, and it is not right. For me, I will tell you that the government in power today is so petty. They are so petty that anything, any slight thing that will happen, as long as you are a voice of reason, they would want to rise on you and just try and find faults in you. Unfortunately, they do not realize that having an opposition in a country is as healthy as having a country that is fruitfully thriving, because it's a process of democracy. You need an opposition in a country. You need someone who's going to wake you up. Democracy demands that you should have an opposition political party, or a voice of reason that is going to tell you the truth with regards to what obtains or what is obtaining. And that is what we are providing. Perhaps. If our colleagues do not appreciate our efforts in trying to ensure that we run this government with them, then therein is the problem. Therein lies the problem. It's an issue of wanting to become a demagogue eventually. And that should never be allowed. You see, we chose democracy for ourselves as a nation. We're a democratic state, and in the process of democracy, there are principles of good governance in the democratic state that have to be followed. Perhaps principles such as separation of power.
there ought to be separation of powers. We should be able to see the separation of powers existing, wherein there is an executive arm, there is a legislature, and there is a judiciary. These should be seen to be existing. We had scholars such as Montesquieu, who came up with these principles. These are principles of law and of democracy that have to be respected. Now, that is what we want to request our colleagues to start believing in, because we chose to be a constitutional democracy. These colleagues that are in power today were voted into power on the basis of this same constitution that we have. And this is a constitution that they ought to respect. So, they need to understand, and it is extremely important that the Zambian people equally understand that an opposition is actually a government in waiting, because we run this country together. Whatever it is that the executive arm will do today, if at all there are any slight hiccups that they have, we will come in and remind them to say, colleagues, this is not supposed to be the case. That is why we've not been silent on the many constitutional abrogations. We've reminded our colleagues that the Mopani issue, you ought to have done this, not to get into the intrinsic issues of the case because it is sub judice. We've reminded our colleagues to say, you are violating human rights, of different individuals in the country, to the extent that the special rapporteur's report on human rights by the UN indicated that there are a lot of human rights violations. So these are issues that we've continued to talk about, but our colleagues think we are just being malicious. No one is being malicious. If we are going to be malicious in any way, there are laws that have been provided to ensure that someone is not circulating information which is false, information which is untrue, information that has got potential to incite the removal of a legitimate government from power. You see, these are laws that are there.
Sorry, just to cut you short there, but I wanted us to pick this from a much more realistic point of view and delve into the screaming headlines of yesterday. Zambia woke up to a news bulletin that Zambia had been removed from the UNHCR board, comprising of is it 47? Is it 27 members? And that raised quite a lot of debate. Social media was abuzz with a lot of comments. And coincidentally, the Patriotic Front Secretary General, Raphael had wrote a letter to the United Nations citing several human rights violations, and in which Mumbi Piri's issue was especially prominent. But of course, other issues were also cited, the cases of sedition against a number of opposition members of parliament, also opposition leaders like Fred Membe, President Sean Tembo. So in his write-up, he raised quite a number of issues. So trying to look at the screaming headlines of yesterday that brought about a lot of debate, and also Rafu Nakuchinda's letter to the UN, how do you weigh in on the human rights record of the Zambian government as it stands right now? How is it faring in the face of the international community?
Well, I am on record indicating that there is need for a serious introspection by this government with regards to human rights abuses. I am on record reminding our colleagues at the police to say we have a constitution that has guaranteed citizens of Zambia their rights and freedoms. Now, these rights and freedoms are inalienable. They cannot be separated. They cannot be taken away from people the way that they've been taken away from people. I am on record indicating that these reports that are given by the Law Association of Zambia, civil society organizations, the church, concerning the many human rights abuses are what is obtaining on the ground. And then now we have seen reports by the American Embassy, for example, in their Human Rights Report of 2022, indicating the many abuses of human rights that are occurring in Zambia. We have seen reports of the special rapporteurs on human rights indicating that there is an escalation in the human rights abuses. Now, you need to understand that being a member of that committee of the UNHCRC, it simply means that it's actually an elective position. Now, as a country, in order for you to even be elected, there are things that are considered. They look at your status in terms of human rights coordination, human rights respect of human rights, and many other issues. Now, looking at the fact that Zambia's human rights report by the Special Rapporteur is in the negative, do you surely think Zambia would have been elected? The answer is a definite no. How do you elect a person who's keen on ensuring that they protect human rights of its citizens?
You're suggesting that...
So here's the thing. I want you to understand that in itself, being an elective position, Zambia wouldn't even have had the demeanor to even suggest that they should be party to that. So ideally, what I'm trying to say is, right now, this government needs a serious introspection with regards to these human rights abuses that are happening. They should not just be there to receive information and sleep on it, or information enters in one ear and leaves on the other end. What they need to do is to remember, for example, that this president that is there was elected on the basis that he promised to restore the rule of law. What we are seeing, even on his inauguration, by the way, he promised that he shall rule by the rule of law. He shall not persecute or prosecute his predecessors, and he shall not treat his predecessors the way that he thought he was being treated. But what we are seeing is worse than what this person had promised. I get to wonder at times whether our president needs religious guidance now from someone to just remind him to say, Mr. President, you had said this during your inauguration. Because I don't believe it is right that he can slide back on his word like this. What we are seeing is extremely bad. What we are seeing is where the opposition will be treated in a very unfair manner. The opposition will be arrested for making comments that are purely fair comments. For example, I believe that if one cannot stand the heat in the kitchen, what is the best way to do it? Leave the kitchen. If a politician cannot have a thick skin to receive criticisms, be it positive or negative, then that person should not be considered a leader worth the sort of running this country. And that is plain and clear. You know, we had leaders in this country who were once called cabbage. Mwanawasa was called a cabbage. Rupia Banda was once called Chumbu Munshololwa. Michael Sata was once called, I don't know if it's Cobra or whatever. Edgar Lungu was once called Jameson. But these are leaders that had thick skins. Now today, if President Hakainde is called names, whatever names he wants to react with the aggression of a tyrant, that is not right. We should not allow that. We should remind our president to have a thick skin. Because in a democratic state, you expect the opposition to give you positive criticisms. Criticisms that will put you on your toes and do the right things. You should not slumber to think all is merry and rosy. It should not be the case. So what we are seeing today is a scenario which I would actually say it's a repeat of what we've seen previously, where the president is thinking up there that everything is okay on the ground. No, Mr. President, nothing is okay. Nothing is okay. The cost of living is extremely high. We can't afford. The Zambian people are suffering. There is so much suffering. We did not, and on top of that, we had calamities that occurred in this country, such as the drought. Now, what we needed to have, as of right now, what we needed is to have a president that is going to be mindful of the fact that at some point I will need to get to the ground and understand what people are going through.
Okay. Council, probably before we sway much from Kawambwa, I would want us to look at one particular issue that made headlines as well, because there were quite a number of issues in Luapula. There were allegations of violence from the ruling United Party for National Development against opposition members that were campaigning on the ground. And one such allegation that came out quite strongly was that of the attack on the opposition members, particularly Sean Tembo, by one Trevor Mwinde. And I think reports were made to the effect that Mr. Tembo had to actually run to a police station, and the story here is that he was turned away and asked to go and be elsewhere because he was a noisemaker or he was a troublemaker. Those are the media reports that came through. Would you care to enlighten the nation on what actually transpired, or since you were closer to the happenings on the ground?
Well, reports are that Mr. Tembo may not have been attended to by the police in a manner that he ought to have been attended to. Of course, I was not present when that occurred, but all I can say is I understand reports were made to the police, and up to now, we have not seen any arrest, neither have we seen any person being called in for questioning with regards to the attack that occurred on President Sean Tembo. So it's extremely unfortunate. The violence, we experienced it, yes. I was in the middle of being attacked by these cadres. I experienced that violence with my own eyes, and I saw that violence. I have never experienced the amount of violence that I saw ever in my life of participating in politics. It was very unfortunate. I thank God that I came out unhurt. But whatever the case, we had colleagues that were seriously injured and seriously hurt by these UPND cadres. And I've just come to believe that they've always been a violent party. They've always been aggressive. And I don't think politics should be one way we want to use aggression. I believe that politics is a competition of ideas. We should compete, we should compete with ideas on how to govern this country. I don't believe that violence is the answer. I do not believe that the Zambian people voted for the UPND government because of the violence. No, they voted out the Patriotic Front because of the perception of violence that was there. And there was violence, as a matter of fact. So I don't think the Zambian people appreciate the violence that is happening today. And I believe from me moving on the ground in Matero, I will tell you that the people of Matero have actually said they've made up their minds as to who they are voting out of power. And they know they are voting out of power, the UPND. And you see, the truth of the matter is and has always been that in this country, governments have always been voted out. There is only one government that has ever been voted in. Governments have always been voted out. The government of the UNIP was voted out in 1991 by the MMD. And they've not been voted out and voting in a president because those were best people to be presidents. Most of them have been presidents of convenience. The most notable president of convenience that we've had in this country is President Hakainde Hichilema. The Zambian people felt they could not handle PF violence anymore. They decided to vote out PF. And President Hakainde was the only one who appeared to be a second choice for the Zambian people. So he was the president of convenience. Make no mistake and say President Hakainde has ever been popular in this country. He's never been popular.
But,
and he has to know it now.
Council, that, when you have to come out like that, statistics would most definitely be speaking against you, because you are looking at one of the presidents who has had one of the most overwhelming votes by the...
That is why I'm telling you, realistically speaking, the PF was voted out of power. President Hakainde appeared to be the only other alternative the Zambian people had. That is why I'm saying he is a president of convenience. The Zambian people felt convenient to put him into power. Not that he was the most popular person. I will tell you that today, because I believe President Hakainde was not the most popular person. This is when he's trying to increase his popularity. Unfortunately, I don't think fate has been on his side, or is it nature? He's become even worse than he may have been in 2021. I don't think that, like I told you, I have gone around in Matero constituency, and I will tell you that the people of Matero constituency feel that this president has failed to deliver to the expectations of the Zambians. Why? Because the Zambian people, the people in Matero, were promised that we'll be buying Millennium at 50 kwacha. The opposite is happening, where we are now buying Millennium at 450 kwacha. The people of Matero were promised that we are going to have a kwacha that will have so much value in appreciation to the extent that it's going to be very valuable against other convertible currencies. But what we are seeing is the exact opposite. Today we are buying $1 for about 28.4 kwacha. Very unfortunate. The people of Zambia were promised that because there was a middleman in the procurement of oil, or is it fuel, that is why we are buying fuel at 17.5 kwacha or 17.6. We were supposed to be buying fuel at 13 kwacha. But today we are seeing the exact opposite. So there is this issue where the Zambian people are now saying, this president that we thought was going to deliberately liberate us is not doing as was agreed, is not doing as he promised. So therein lies the problem. So what we need to do is, when we are offering our solutions on the table, we are requesting this president to say, Mr. President, these are the solutions we've brought on the table. Can you please listen to them, do the right thing? We only have one Zambia, and which Zambia we want to unite. Currently, there's a serious division in the country, serious division, which we want to ensure that we restore. We have told the division is based on tribal lines, which should never be the case.
Because, there has been a lot of talk about division in the country, but then people are only talking about the division, but they are not taking care to mention the actual areas of division.
Like I said, the divisions mostly have been on tribal lines. They've been on tribal lines, and many commentators have indicated that these have been too visible. Unfortunately, the incumbent has not wanted to speak to these issues to correct the narrative. I've always been on record requesting that the process of employing civil servants should be on a merit base. There should be meritorious employment. You upgrade people's positions or employment based on merit. I've always indicated that. And that is the basis of the level of integrity that you're going to build in our civil service. But what we have been seeing is where our colleagues will have nepotic kind of employment, where they get their relatives, they get their girlfriends, their best friends, as the case may be. That should never be the case. Let's employ people on merit. Now, when you do that, it means you try and destroy the process itself of managing a civil service which is objective and which is able to deliver to the expectations of the Zambian people in accordance with the Civil Service Code. Now, what we have been seeing is where now some of us have come up with initiatives to say, now when you are trying to refer to my motto, I will now be saying it's Mukandila Nabako 73. Because I'm trying to remind people that we need to unite this country. We've got 73 ethnic groups in this country, and we shall live as one. So the issue of division should never occur. So for me, I believe it all starts with the figurehead of a country who has to call on this unity. We want this unity
coming
to come
from the PF, and you had the privilege of running government for 10 years. And the biggest cry that was out there still is still the same cry that you're making mention of division through partisan line, and largely attributed to tribalism. Okay? So this is a call that you're making, that there is rampant tribalism in this country. It is just a mirror of the calls that the UPNG were making. So then, could this be that this is being done in retribution to what was obtaining during the PF regime?
Definitely, that would be the perception of the Zambian people, that there is it's a retributive, there's retribution that is occurring. But for me, I will say it's just an issue of lack of good leadership, because you should be able to learn from your experience. If the PF were doing wrong things and you've identified them as wrong things, today they can never be called right. And that is my belief. My belief is a wrong that was being done in PF should never be considered right today in this day and era. Our colleagues ought to have learned from the experiences that we underwent. As PF, if there was division, if there was tribalism, today that should never occur. If we are seeing it, and it's even worse, it means we've got a bad crop of leaders in this country. And it's an issue that has to do with patriotism also. I don't believe that the crop of leaders that we have today is as patriotic as we want it to be. And the reason is simple. It is because today, as we are seated here, my brother, I will tell you that the amount of gold that is generated from this country is massive. And yet we still want to beg for $1.4 billion from IMF. The amount of copper that we generate is massive. The amount of sugilite, the amount of, the sub-product malachite, the amount of cobalt, it is massive. Zambia today brags to be the largest, amongst the largest producers of copper in the region. But we don't even have 1 ton, even 1 gram of copper reserves in this country. Did you know that we don't have any copper reserves in this country? Nothing. Today we brag to be the largest exporter of emeralds in the world. We don't even have 30 grams of emeralds in our reserves. In fact, we've not even created a strategic reserve base for our minerals, which we are going to say we are now going to have these reserves. Today, we had started the process of purchasing gold to increase our gold reserves at the Bank of Zambia. But that process was stopped because this government, when it came in, it politicized the whole process, forgetting that government is a continuous process we need to continue to run. And that is why I've been reminding my colleagues that the civil service is and will always work with the government of the day. This political power that every other party which comes into power will have, according to our constitution, is limited to a period of 5 years. And that is why I remind my civil servants, my colleagues from the civil servants, to say it is okay to do the right thing. Do not be abused. Do not be used as agents of doom by the incumbent. Because a day of reckoning will come where you'll be taken to court and you shall be alone in there. You will find yourself sharing your pension because you will have followed a very wrong instruction. So for me, I will tell you that there is an issue which is very critical that we need to resolve. And there is this issue that has been peddled by UPND members as well as the incumbent, that there is no opposition in Zambia and we don't have any other alternative. Bwana, that is a lie. The same way that we thought there was no opposition in 2021 is the same way the Zambian people are feeling that yes, there is no opposition, but we shall have a president of convenience because you have failed the Zambian people. So this is something that they need to start understanding. You are sending or driving a narrative that there is no opposition. Well, if you say there is no opposition, that is up to you. But remember that any person may emerge and decide to even stand as an independent president. The Constitution allows that.
Council, just hold your thought there. Let me just take you back a bit before I completely interrupt. You were talking about the amount of mineral wealth that Zambia is endowed with, and the large amounts of gold that are being extracted from this country by different players on the market. So then, how does the level of extraction of our mineral wealth relate to probably a distant issue of the financial intelligence reports, because we have steadily seen a spike in the amounts that have been reported by the FIC. Recently, I think Director General Kapalu did mention that the 2024 has got a projection of about 83 billion kwacha equivalent of reported illicit transactions. Okay, and 2021 had 3.9 billion. 2022 had 3.4 billion. 2023 had 60 billion. So the trend really is that there is a steady rise. What could be triggering this increase in the illicit transactions?
My brother, we don't need to massage the words. There is no steady rise. There is an unbelievable, extraordinary rise. Because you can't move from 6 billion, is it? I mean, from 3 billion to 60 billion. That is extraordinary. It simply means that our colleagues did not even want to come and run this country to ensure that they manage our economy properly. It means they just wanted to come in and externalize money. They steal money. And what we are seeing is complete and total failure of systems now. Corruption is rampant, and we are seeing this corruption. Nothing is being done. No action is being taken. The Anti-Corruption Commission today is toothless because they do not want to fight corruption that is happening today. President Hakainde is on record indicating that he shall fight corruption of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It is future corruption. But what we are seeing is the exact opposite. The Anti-Corruption Commission is not moving on cases that we are seeing. And the reason is because the Anti-Corruption Commission sits at State House. And I'm on record indicating to say, as long as the Anti-Corruption Commission is sitting at State House, we are not going to have vigil fight against corruption in this country. It shall remain a fallacy. You will talk about it, but it will not be acted upon. So, for me, I will tell you, with the many mineral reserves that we have, many mineral resources that we have, today we should not be suffering. All we need is a patriotic leadership now. So, going forward, as Zambians, we need to have a mindset change. Let us now have patriotic leadership to run this country. Our colleague who decided to be very patriotic in Burkina Faso today has made Burkina Faso to be a country that is debt-free. Did you know that today Burkina Faso is debt-free? As a matter of fact, now they are using their resources, their gold, to pay all their debts. Now imagine the amount of gold that we have today in this country. There is a report from the UAE that about $1.3 billion worth of gold was imported into Dubai as of 2023. That is a report that is there. About $2.5 billion worth of gold was imported into Canada from Zambia. So the question is, why is it that we are allowing such numbers to move and yet we can't see anything to point at? The problem we have, which I believe is the true question you need to answer, is that we do not have patriotic leadership. Why is it that we are not talking about the amount of cobalt that we are exporting in this country, and yet we've concentrated much on the copper that we are exporting? And yet it is believed that Zambia is the second largest producer of cobalt in Africa. So these are statistics we need to be looking at. But the reason I will tell you today, and I will tell you tomorrow as I wake up, inshallah, the reason why we have this happening in this country is because we've got bad leadership. We don't have patriotic leadership in this country. Today, my brother, I can assure you that if we were to have a patriotic leadership, we will not have a debt that we have. In the next 4 years, we will be debt-free. In fact, in the next 3 years, we will be debt-free as a country. And I can assure you, let's just have a serious patriotic leadership. Come 2026, we are going to be debt-free.
I realize that this is one topic, especially around the economy and the FIC reports in relation to the way our mineral resources are getting depleted. That is practically all day to discuss. Well, Perhaps maybe time may not actually be our best ally for the evening. Millennium tonight is only allocated an hour. But then there is two main issues I want us to touch as we wind down. I think we can go down and some of the closing remarks. In the year 2024, do you think the UPND upheld the rule of law? How do you think the UPND government fared insofar as upholding the rule of law is concerned? And secondly, falling back on the issue that we have discussed on this evening, do you think the opposition played its fair part in governance issues in 2024? And to crown it all, before we left the village, there were some elders who were seen talking to you, and some village people were gathered and blessing showered on Celestine on him going ahead to espouse his political prospects in Zambia, really. Maybe you can also clear the air to the country as to what your political ambitions are as you close down. Are we seeing it in the peril, or are we going to stand with the village before
Actually, it was actually not in a village. I was in my constituency in Matero. Yeah, well, of course, every Christmas I want to share with the people around the constituency. So I was sharing my Christmas and having my Christmas lunch with my people in Matero constituency. And of course, they decided to bless me and rallied behind me and assured me that they shall be with me through thick and thin. And that is one thing I will not take for granted, as a matter of fact. Yeah. But of course, with regards to the human rights standing of the country, as well as the rule of law, respect for this country by the UPND, if I have to rate them out of 10, I will give them -1. And the answer is because the reason is because what we have seen is extremely shocking. That systems of government will break down in this manner, where we will not follow procurement processes and procedures, where we are not going to follow procedures outlined in the Constitution, where individuals' human rights will be abrogated at will, at the will of those in authority, where the chairperson of the Electoral Commission of Zambia would stand with a mic and indicate that they shall abrogate the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia because they feel it is what they want to do at will. You cannot do that. So where we are seeing such abrogations, I will tell you to say that is a serious breakdown in the rule of law, and we need to have a serious sanitization. We need to sanitize our leadership in this country. We need to sanitize this government and the thought they have, because you cannot go out there and, for example, indicate that we want to breach constitutional provisions. You know, the Electoral Commission of Zambia chairperson was out there telling Zambians that they will proceed with elections in either Kawambwa or is it Pambashe or Petauke, whether a person withdraws their nomination or not. That is unheard of. We need to respect the Constitution upon which we get our power from. So for me, I would say UPND's performance, I'll give them a -0 or a -1 in terms of rule of law. But what we need to do is we should continue to speak to these issues. It is also possible that our leaders in this government are not aware that this is what they are doing. But when we continue talking to these issues, they will then be aware that this is what is happening. So if we stop talking, it's a problem. Now, that is why I'm saying they cannot continue gagging us. Let's not gag voices of reason. So that in itself provides a proper way of them checking themselves. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, did the opposition play its part in the governance issues in 2024? Have you accounted for yourself well?
Like I indicated, I believe an opposition political party or the opposition is actually a government in waiting. we saw the opposition coming out strong on many issues of governance in this country. Unfortunately, we've seen the police abusing certain provisions of the law to arrest opposition players in the process of helping to run this country or to govern this country. So the opposition played their role. Unfortunately, there is a scheme by this government to try and ensure that they decimate opposition, the opposition in this country. They get rid of any opposition, which is against principles of democracy. You know, so for me, I believe the opposition played their part. I believe the opposition are still playing their role in ensuring that this country is governed accordingly. And the Zambian people equally have a bigger role to play. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, viewers. This has been Celestine Mukandila, a prominent Lusaka lawyer and also a member of the Patriotic Front, which is also a member of the Tonse Alliance. As you have heard through our deliberations, through the topic national matters, a number of things have been said by Council Celestine Mukandila on national matters. And we are hopeful that a listening government like the one we have should be taking into account the voices that are pronounced on such matters, especially like that of Council and many others. And we are hopeful that good governance traits will continue in our country. This has been Collins Mwansamulipa, your host. Good night.